What's up? Welcome back to Locked On NBA Draft. We had a very busy first weekend of February, joined by Leif Thulin. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And today we're going to give you some stuff to bet on, maybe some hot takes. Give a couple new takes that you may not have seen, not just for clicks and whatnot, but actually things that we believe, because that is the nature of the draft. Is not everything is as consensus. In fact, it's almost the opposite. You don't want to stay with the consensus, but not to a point. But ultimately, we're going to bring you some of our hottest takes that we haven't brought out yet, including what could be with Duke, could be with some rising players, and then recap and preview what happened in college basketball. But first, let's get that intro music.
You are Locked On NBA Draft, your daily podcast on the NBA Draft, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA Draft, joined by Leif Thulin, my co-host. As always, got a little bit of a change in the scenery if you're watching on YouTube, which if you're not, go ahead and subscribe to us, Locked On NBA Draft. Leif, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. We got a good week of college basketball behind us, a good one coming up, and there's some movements on of some prospects, I think, that are shooting up some boards, some that are slipping down, and I'm excited to talk about it all.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you for everybody for listening, for making us your first listen of the day at Locked On NBA Draft. We have a good episode for you. We're going to preview recap what happened in college basketball. We're going to preview what will happen in this upcoming week, some expectations, some big games, and then we're going to talk about some special games and some special players that we see aren't getting enough attention on some boards, or maybe some areas that are being under discussed that may be seen as hot takes, but generally, what needs to be an open discussion about some certain players. So let's dive right into it. I think one of the first games that I'd want to talk about was Kentucky versus Alabama. This one had honestly, we didn't even know what to expect. All I know coming into it from a draft perspective was we had J.D. Davison versus Ty Washington. That would have been, I think that was their first meeting of the year, if I'm not mistaken, and it should be their only. And I don't know, it's a weird game. Ty Washington didn't really stand out. Only 2 assists. Granted, assists are a two-man stat. You have to have someone make a shot. 15 points on 15 shots, 3 rebounds, 1 steal. And then J.D. Davison wasn't very good. He was 3 of 10, 7 points, 6 rebounds, 3 turnovers, 0 assists. Talk to me about this game, what you saw, and what some of your takeaways were, Leif.
It was an interesting game because I think I expected a track meet, and it was not that. You've got some super athletic teams. You got a lot of talent on the floor, a lot of speed, a lot of big dudes that can really run. Oscar Tshiebwe was what he's been all year. He's getting rebounds at an elite level. He's the number 1 rebounder in the country. He had 15 rebounds, and it felt pretty pedestrian. I think the biggest difference was the shooting. Not that Kentucky really lit it up from the outside, but Alabama went 3 of 30 from three-point range. Kentucky only had 4 threes. They went 4 of 11. When that happens, you shoot certainly a higher field goal percentage. They went 40% from the field. Alabama was 18 of 64, or 28%. So the game was never terribly close, in my opinion. And Kentucky proved they're one of the best 5 teams in the country to me, because Alabama's given a run to the money to the best teams in the country. They lost by 4 to Auburn. They beat Gonzaga. They beat Houston. These are tough teams to play. They beat Baylor. They beat 3 of the final 4 teams, and the only one they haven't played is UCLA, who ironically enough is the one that beat them in the Sweet 16. Long story short, I think Ty didn't play a great game, but he didn't make as many errors as the guards of Alabama. And guard play, turnovers, and shooting, the team that won all 3 phases was Kentucky, and therefore they won the game.
Yeah, it was one of the more hideous games. If you look through the box score, only one person on Alabama scored double digits. And actually, it's someone who I kind of wanted to touch on just for a second, but Charles Bediako, I don't know how much of an NBA guy he is, but 7 foot, he's long, he's pretty athletic, can potentially shoot, went 4 of 4 from the line. If that's really the intrigue, if that can happen. Had 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block. He had best statistical game for Alabama. I don't know if he's necessarily a guy, but he had some good defense on Oscar Tshiebwe, which, player of the year candidate, might be the front runner, is Oscar Tshiebwe. So I was impressed by him, but that was probably the only thing about Alabama that I could say positively. 3 for 30 is a disgusting number. I've seen this as a Mavs fan where they try and keep chucking, and that's what it felt like. It was just nothing was there.
Yeah, it was feast or famine for sure. And the old adage, you live and die by the 3, really came true. They went 3 of 30 and they died, and they kept shooting. Honestly, I was like, okay, that's a good thing. But I think that's the way they're structured. Nate Oates wants them to run and gun. They didn't get many transition points because Kentucky didn't have too many live ball turnovers. And so if you don't get transition points or hit any threes, Alabama is in trouble. And they're 4-6 in SEC play after winning the SEC last year. They lost 2 shooters in Herb Jones, and I think that's starting to bite them in the butt. But also, I think their guards need to create easier shots. I think they shoot difficult shots off the dribble, and that's something to watch because their guards are super talented and all could be very good individual players, could be NBA prospects. But, you have to play as a team, and I think that's what Kentucky did better in this game than Alabama.
Yeah, I agree. And, Alabama's conference play has been not good. Losing to Georgia is generally a scary mark to have on your record. Auburn almost had that happen over the weekend, which shout out to the Dogs for almost going 3-0 this year, or excuse me, 3-1, I guess, this year against the state of Alabama in college sports. But they almost pulled it off. They could not pull it off. But Alabama's just kind of been a mess. They're probably gonna. They'll make it to the tournament, but they're not going to be a sexy name to, going in. They need a hot run now. Going into March, there's about 3 weeks till, or 3.5, 4. I don't even know what day it is. It's about a month. It's over a month till Selection Sunday, but the momentum starts now. So Alabama's an interesting one. Changing coast, another team that I feel like has warranted talking about a lot about is UCLA. UCLA lost to the state of Arizona. I'll just go with that this week twice. They lost at Arizona on the 3rd. They lost by 10 points, which was a pretty big upset. And then they lost in triple overtime to Arizona State by 3. And Arizona State is really bad. They're 7-13. That's inexcusable for the number 3 team. And I think the biggest NBA takeaway from this is Peyton Watson played in a total of 11 minutes. That's scary. What were some of your takeaways from just UCLA in general this week?
I was very disappointed with their game against Arizona State. Arizona State was 6-13 entering that game. I get it's in Tempe, but that was a disappointing game, especially the experience you bring back. If you fight to overtime, you typically expect with all your starters in the game, a team that made the Final Four, you got 8 players that are really solid college players, and you lose in 3 overtimes, 3 chances to show that you're the superior team. That was disappointing. I think your Peyton Watson takeaway is accurate. I also think we saw this at the Combine last year. Johnny Juzang does not create his own shot at the NBA Combine level. I think in this game, you saw down the stretch, the only person who created their shot effectively was Jaime Jaquez. And that's a guy that I would take in the second round. I may be higher on him than most, but he's one of those guys that he's a glue guy by definition, but he's more than a glue guy for his team. He's a co-star on that team. I was disappointed in their play. I will say, though, in their defense, I expected them to go 1-1 on the week. I thought Arizona was going to beat them. I know they beat Arizona by 16, but Azuolas Tubelis didn't play for Arizona in the previous meeting at Pauley Pavilion, and I expected the McHale Center to be pretty raucous. So I've only got a gripe with the loss at Arizona State.
Yeah, Arizona is a good team, and Ben Mathurin, Christian Coloco, Dalen Terry, Tubelis. Those are 4 NBA prospects right there. And every single one of those players had a good game. They all scored double digits. Coloco didn't, but he still had a good game. Ben Mathurin, 4 of 8, who, again, Mathurin remains someone who is going to be a lottery pick. If you haven't, we haven't really done a lot about him, but he is a 3-and-D wing with athleticism and much more than I think a 3-and-D guy. 6'7", can shoot the lights out, 36%. Really athletic again, 2 assists per game. I can do just a lot more. But that he's someone who I feel like is that's a big win taking down number 3. For the last game of the week to cover This one was really lopsided. This is I was really surprised by Kansas over Baylor. That was an absolute blowout. Kansas just, granted, it was in Lawrence. They won 83-59. I mean, this is a team that I had previously said was the number one team in the country, that they should run the tables. And now I'm really not so sure about it. Luckily, they're cold in this part of the season, not in the end of this month going into March. But, I mean, Baylor losing by 24, that's scary. That's a really scary sight. What did you see in this that stood out to you?
They couldn't handle the ball. I mean, 24 honestly seems generous. Like, it felt like it was a worse loss than 24. My big takeaway, I will say they're missing LJ Cryer, who's one of their best guards, important. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they go when Kansas and Baylor play in Waco, Baylor wins. But that said, James Akinjo had a bunch of turnovers. Adam Flagler didn't play well. Kendall Brown didn't play well. I think as much as Kansas played well and had a redemption game in Lawrence after a game where they got blitzed by Kentucky, I would say the bigger story was Baylor's guards, who I've said is the best group quartet in the country. They laid an egg. They were terrible, and their transition defense was awful. The only bright spot I saw was Jeremy Sohan. He played hard, didn't play that well, but he was better than everyone else by a substantial level on his team. As for Kansas, Agbaji and Brown both had 18 and 10 and 18 and 9. They're well balanced. I think Baylor has a higher ceiling still, but I was terribly disappointed in the guard play, and that is something to be concerned about. Like, I was with you that they seemed like they were the best team in the country, and I have some concerns now.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can always count on is one of Jeremy Sohan and Kendall Brown. One of them is always going to be someone who stands out every single game with Baylor. That's the beauty of that team. For me, I mean, again, Ochai Agbaji, even going 2 of 6 from 3, he still had 18 points, 2 assists, 9 rebounds on 5 of 11. He continues to impress. Christian Brown is a guy who he's going to get some buzz as a microwave scorer early second round. I think you might get some value from him. Those two guys have been playing really well. And also there was a Jalen Wilson assist. He's someone who had some off-court concerns that he has had to overcome, but he's coming back into form. He's really fallen off from I don't know if he's draftable, but he's making some nice plays. 7 of 10, had 4 assists, 7 rebounds, 15 points, 2 steals, 1 block, like pretty stacked game, and 2 of 2 within the 3-point line. So he had a good game. This game was just something, I feel like the rematch, correct me if I'm wrong, like that there is I'm just making sure now I'm doubting myself. This isn't their second meeting, right?
This is their first.
Okay, good. Yeah, their second meeting will be very interesting. I'm very excited to see that. Health will be something, but I mean, even McCormick wasn't 100% healthy, so we'll see. But it was a good week in college basketball. I'm excited for this upcoming week, which we'll preview as always in the third segment of this show. But first, let me tell you a little bit about our friends over at TurboTax. People think unusual circumstances mean complicated taxes, but for TurboTax Live experts, that's what makes things interesting. We all have unique lives, whether you've invested in crypto for the first time over this last year, own an up-and-coming small business, or are raising a rambunctious twins. Luckily, TurboTax has live experts who can answer tax questions, walk you through the whole process, or do your taxes for you from start to finish. They help you get every deduction you deserve, no matter what your unique situation is. And you can talk to a TurboTax Live expert through your phone or computer without leaving your house. TurboTax Live experts are here to help you however you need, and if you need an extra hand off your taxes to them, and they'll do it all for you. Go to TurboTax.com to learn more. You do your thing. They've got your taxes into it. TurboTax Live. So back with not Raphael, as I just put up on the screen. I apologize about that. I am not Raphael Barlow. I am Richard Stayman, and I'm joined by Leif Thulin, as always, on this Tuesday. So Leif and I were talking about some stuff, just casual draft stuff, and I'll start off with mine. I was telling him, like, we've been too pedestrian on this show lately. We need to fire off something that, scorches the earth a little bit more. So I want to talk about someone. I'll let Leif go after, because it'll kind of segue us into a little bit more organic of a conversation. But I'll start a little bit out in left field and bring us towards the infield. Eric Gaines. Eric Gaines is my guy. I might just be a sucker for the saucy kind of plays that he makes, and that very well could just be the entire issue. But I really do feel like Eric Gaines is actually one of the hottest risers and should be a top 30 guy. I don't know how hot this of a take this is, but really the ultimate point is to get the conversation going, because Eric Gaines is someone who a lot of people on draft Twitter are very torn on. There's some people who see the fact that he's 6'2", 155. That's per Basketball Reference. I don't know if that's exact, but he's 6'2", 155, has the small frame, but man, he produces a lot of turnovers. 2 steals per game, can defend like very well, I think, on ball in terms of just moving his feet. Needs to add the strength to actually, scale up in the NBA. But the three-point shot is there. He's kind of raw. The field goal percentage, I get it, 37%, 24% from the line, but from three, 77% from the line, and just does so much and has some really creative passes, just super advanced reads. And his handles are very nice. He's just super deceptive with the ball. I think he's someone, if you're looking for that absolute upside swing, Eric Gaines is the guy. I don't know if you got to see him, Leaf, but we previewed, if you remember last Tuesday, we talked about, I want to see how Vanderbilt does. And I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back, because I said Scottie Pippen Jr., one of the toughest guards in the SEC, was going against 2 of the best prospects in the SEC, in Ty Washington, who he lit up 33 points. And then he didn't exactly light up Eric Gaines, but I don't know if it was really an Eric Gaines thing or just he missed a lot, which I'm personally, from watching the game, I think he just missed. He went 2 of 12, but it was a big test for Eric Gaines, and he still came out on top. I don't know how much you've seen of Eric Gaines, because there's hundreds of prospects, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on him rising to potentially top 30.
I think that is a hot take. I'm not there on top 30. My issue is just shooting. 24% from 3, and he's pretty diminutive in stature. I do know. I remember we were talking about Mike Miles in a couple weeks ago on this show, and you were saying, "Is there a good matchup for him?" And I was like, "Eric Gaines could be a scrappy pest in this game." So yeah, I did watch a bit of that. I've seen Eric Gaines play. I saw them against Kentucky earlier in the year and he gave Ty Washington and Severe Wheeler problems. Defensively, he's a beast. One more guy that actually reminds me of him, and I think this is a guy that'll be on a board later as well, that could be Reese Beekman. Him and Eric Gaines are very similar. He's also from Louisiana, or he went to high school there. Just popped in my head. Leads the NCAA in assist to turnover ratio, and defensively he's a pest. Eric Gaines is the same side. I'm not sure I can get behind top 30. I can take him. He's draftable to me, though. Despite the size, he needs to work on his shooting, but he's an effective college point guard and can be a good NBA point guard as a backup, in my opinion.
Hey, I appreciate that. And yes, I do remember the Reese Beekman love, because I remember watching Virginia and I go, we've totally, like, this is before you were officially my co-host. This is back like in October. You were talking about, hey, watch Reese Beekman as one of the better guards in the ACC. And lo and behold, it's happening. And if he's not, like, obviously his stats don't pop off at 8 points a game, but he does so much of everything else. Same steals number as Eric Gaines, and just really efficient. I mean, 35% from 3, 44%. Reese Beekman's another guy who, I mean, he'll eventually make his way there too. You were on him early. So I know you had told me, I'll be honest, you told me what yours was. Yours is a little bit more organic because it allows us to talk about something much bigger. Go ahead and tell me what that discussion you wanted to open up was.
Okay, so for those of you listening, this is not something I am fully wed to as an idea, but I think this is worth a discussion. I think there's a chance that AJ Griffin will be a better player than Paolo Banchero. And I'm not saying he should be the top option on Duke in terms of scoring. A lot of what he does is off the catch. He's 99th percentile on catch and shoots. He's scoring 1.3 points per possession on those, which is pretty ridiculous. My thinking here is that he's nearly a year younger. He's coming off a knee injury, so a lot of his athleticism is being dampened, and he's playing 20 minutes a game. Yet in the past 5 games, he scored more points than Paolo Banchero, who's played about 12 minutes per game more. That's about 60 minutes more in 5 games. And he scored more, and that includes a game where he scored 5 points. Against Carolina, he went 11 of 17, hit threes, he opened up. There are games where, like, he catches the ball against Louisville. He went 5 for 5 from 3 to start that game too. He catches the ball and he shoots, and you're like, oh shoot, that's going in. He's one of the best shooters in the country. He's 6'6", 222, 18 years old, off a pretty serious knee injury. And I've got him at number 5 on my board and Banchero at 3 at the moment. But I think this bears a very real discussion of who's the better prospect long term. And I think it depends fits with the NBA. Often you say best player available, and I think it's close enough where you'd say, well, there's some teams I'd take AJ Griffin. And it may not be the case because there are guys I have above Banchero, such as Chet and Jabari. And obviously Jaden Ivey's in that mix, and that's my solid top 5 right there. But I think there are 2 Duke Blue Devils that you need to be thinking about as top 5 picks. And that's not crazy. But one, AJ Griffin could be the better player down the road from Duke in this class.
Hey, and I like it because one, it's not just like hey, this random number 27th consensus player is actually a top 5. It's not like some BS hot take. It's a really well-founded thing because I also have AJ Griffin at number 5, and he's climbing. And while there is concern for me, the 3-point shooting right now, like I'm very interested to see how he looks when that slumps because this is mathematically impossible to sustain. He's taking 3 threes a game, shooting 50% and also 70% from the line, barely getting there, which is kind of weird considering his play style. But I think that number is going to come down, and I think we're going to see really just how good he is when that 3-point shot isn't falling because you see this in prospects. It's natural to miss. It's natural to have bad runs of 3-point shooting. We've been tricked into thinking that, you can have hot streaks, and AJ Griffin has played in 22 games already. So this isn't like some super small sample size, but we also don't want to be like fooled into like Aaron Nesmith, who shot 52% over 12 games. And we were like, all right, sold on him as a shooter. We never got to see him regress. And now in the NBA, it really looks more like what the opposite end of that was. And we don't know what it will be with AJ Griffin. My one thing for the shot, not buying the shot, is his shot form is kind of weird. It's not the prettiest. Like the base is really, I guess,
really wide.
Yeah, it's really the only way I can really think of it. And it's the way he kind of pushes the shot. It's a little bit of a push shot, but ultimately there's no fundamental things like I'm nitpicking at that point. With Paolo, he does have shortcomings. I mean, there are legitimate concerns about some of his in-game athleticism, how he can use it in the half court. AJ Griffin, I can't say the same thing. And ultimately, to end this rant, I mean, you're picking between a great scorer and a guy who could be a great all-around player. And when that's the situation, I don't really think it's a hot take to take the great all-around player. I mean, there are people who are making cases on draft Twitter that I see that are saying, hey, AJ Griffin could very well be the best player from this draft. So before we go on with more AJ Griffin, was there anything this is a massive game, the North Carolina Duke game. AJ Griffin played super well. I'll just read off his stat line and then we can go into the game. But he had 27 points, 11 of 17 shooting, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, went 3 of 6 from 3, 2 of 2 from the line. Talk to me about that game because that was the storyline of the weekend, Coach K's last visit to Chapel Hill.
I just wasn't impressed with Carolina for the most part in that game. Duke came out well, and Carolina didn't have the firepower to come back. I think their guards need to get better. Caleb Love's a guy that I've heard people. I've heard some people say even lottery. I think that's crazy high personally, but I think there are a lot of people have him around 30, and I still think he's a second round pick because he needs to improve his playmaking. He can shoot, but he doesn't do it for himself. Like he can create a shot, but he doesn't do it within the system. Armando Bacot's the only player on Carolina that's truly productive on a consistent basis. Brady Manick had a good game, but that wasn't going to be enough when there's 2 top 5 picks on the other side. Not to mention guys like Wendell Moore Jr., who's probably the 3rd best prospect, or Mark Williams. Take your pick of Duke guys. Their depth of talent and breadth of talent really took over in that game. And I don't think it was – I thought Duke was going to win. I thought it'd be close just because it's the rivalry. But the one team's significantly better than the other. And I think they were motivated for Coach K. And AJ Griffin and Paolo Banchero early was the story, and AJ Griffin throughout the game was the story.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we had a very casual double-double from Paolo Banchero going 13 and 10 on 5 of 14. So not the most efficient game, but, he was still able to get the ball in the basket. Mark Williams, I think, looked really good, even had 2 assists, 2 blocks. Like he had some monster finishes too. There was one I remember on Brady Manick, but I mean, that Duke team is stacked. Trevor Keels comes off the bench. Like it's ridiculous. North Carolina had no chance. And just one thing on Caleb Love before we go into our final portion and talk about some of the upcoming games. Caleb Love is someone who when he was hot, like I'd say probably through Christmas, I had him as top 30 prospect. I was there. Now I moved him to 50. So, you kind of said it best. Can he create for others? Can he consistently, while creating for himself consistently and also consistently shooting? It's a tough question to answer. But when we come back, we will talk about some of the games that we have our eyes set on for this weekend. But again, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues into the Super Bowl next weekend. Bengals, Rams, and obviously that's a big game. And then also NBA playoffs are now only a couple months away, and March Madness is a month away. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football and basketball. They also have NHL, college basketball, whenever the MLB comes back from lockout, boxing, UFC, along with real lifetime updates of current games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022 season. Bet online where the game starts. So back with Leif Thulin again. To finish up our show, we're going to talk about some of our big games that we have our eyes set on. And obviously, every week in conference play, especially for these Power 5 conferences, you're always going to get prospect matchups. So for me, I'll start with tonight on Tuesday. There's one that really stands out. If you follow me on Twitter, Abstraft, Leif's nodding his head. He already knows what I'm about to say. Wisconsin versus Michigan State is a big one. That to me is a massive test for two players. One, let's just start with Johnny Davis. He just came off the worst game of his season, his first single-digit scoring game. He was getting lit up by Seth Lundy at Penn State and a couple other guys while he had the ball in his hands. I'm really interested to see how a better defender and better prospect in Max Christie, someone who I'm a massive fan of, does against him. And Max Christie's a really good defender. I have my eyes set on that game. Do you have your eyes? Is that one of the games you're pretty set on, or is there another game that has stood out to you?
That's one I like, but there's a better Big Ten game in that, and that's Illinois at Purdue. Last time these two met up, they went to double overtime. Purdue was the better team in that game, even though it was in Champaign. Illinois has gotten better since then. Illinois, to me, is one of the better teams in the country that's not ranked super highly. And Kofi's playing out of his mind. Not necessarily a draft prospect, but this is just like, you got to give credit where credit's due it sometimes. Zach Edey's the same way. He's enormous. This is a battle of titans in the paint. And then you've got Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey's awesome. Andre Curbelo is also pretty fun. He's getting better. But Ivey's got a real test, and Trent Frazier is one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten, and that'll be who draws the assignment to guard Ivey. One thing about you mentioned about Johnny Davis is I think Max Christie is awesome. We talked about him last week. I think that Gabe Brown will likely guard. I think because he's older, I think he'll be better at guarding him. But I want to see that individual matchup between Davis and Christie as well. I'm hoping that if the matchup of the draft prospects happens, my head tells me it'll probably be Gabe Brown on Davis. But that's a great two big games in the Big Ten.
Yeah, the Big Ten, honestly, all of today on Tuesday is one of the better scheduling days I feel like we've seen. We also have Indiana plays Northwestern, which I know doesn't jump off the page, but Pete Nance versus Trace Jackson Davis is really intriguing. And then tonight I'll be at TCU versus Oklahoma State and hoping to see Mike Miles play against Isaac Likely, which is a massive test because I've preached this almost every episode, I feel like, but you don't necessarily need to have two top 100 prospects facing off each other to know what you're looking at. Isaac Likely is a really strong defender. One of the best, I would say probably the best guard defender in the conference off the top of my head. I would say like most polished, not necessarily best, because he's not really a prospect because he just doesn't play offense very well, but he will put players in jail and Mike Miles could be a victim. So a couple games though for this weekend that I'm looking forward to. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said that Kentucky, anytime they're playing, I'm always intrigued by, especially if Colin Castleton is playing. They play Florida. Colin Castleton is a fringe top 80 guy for me versus Oscar Tshiebwe, who's a fringe top 75. So they're in the same range. That's something for me to watch. That's a very niche element, but also just Ty Washington, top 10 prospect. Can't really miss out on him. And I'm interested to see that. What are some other games that are standing out for you? I'll let you take this home.
There's not a ton of ranked matchups, so it's like not as fun on paper. This weekend had amazing matchups on paper. None of them really amounted to much. I expect there to be some really competitive games. I'm looking forward to seeing how Baylor rebounds when they play Texas. I expect them to take care of business there. Alabama and Arkansas intrigues me. That's another one that I think, not necessarily from a prospects perspective, I think there are guards for Alabama that'll get better. That'll, and then JD Note is a guy that we're both high on. I don't know where I'd rank him right off the top of my head. I'd have to watch a little more film, but it's a fun matchup. And then one more that I think is cheating a little bit. I'm not terribly intrigued by the score of this game because I think Gonzaga is going to destroy St. Mary's, but I love St. Mary's the way they play. Maybe they'll give them a test. But Chet Holmgren's been awesome of late, and we've talked about Jabari, we talked about Paolo quite a bit. Let's talk about Chet Holmgren real briefly. He had 20 points, 17 rebounds, 6 assists, and 5 blocks in his last game, and that was against BYU, who's second in the big WCC probably. I mean, they've gone in a bit of a cold streak, but entering the league, they're second talent wise, and so I feel pretty confident that Chet's starting to warm up, and I'm excited to see him progress this year and really make the push for number one terribly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we need to spend an entire episode next week. Honestly, let's just talk about Chet. That'll be what we're talking about. This is your tease for next week already. Chet Holmgren's awesome. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan. I don't think he's number one. I don't think I can ever put him number one just because I have so many concerns with his frame. But I do think he could end up being one of them. I think he could be the number one most talented player from this class because what he is doing is just stupid. The game against San Diego, I watched that. I haven't seen the BYU game yet, admittedly, but the San Diego game, I mean, just search Mavs Draft Chet. I tweeted everything I could, and I didn't tweet anything. I felt like I was like, I didn't even post this tiny little thing where he just dominates all of the little stuff, and he's so productive. He's too good for college basketball right now, and I'm very interested to see how he scales up. He is an absolute must-watch, and also they play Pacific. I'm sure he'll play very well against them. I mean, he's a top-tier box score watcher for me. So that'll be someone that we will definitely be talking about next week. So I'll be doing my homework on Chet. I'm sure Leif will too. But Leif, I know since you are still new as the co-host, tell everybody where they can find you. And then, we'll talk about Chet next week. But I'll let you bring it home, Leif. Almost called you Chet there.
I'll take being called Chet. I'll take that mistake. Fun fact about Chet real quickly is he shot entering the BYU game where he played amazingly in the 2017 6-5. He was shooting 64% in his last 30 threes. Some not small but not terribly small sample size, and it was unbelievable for a guy who's 7'1". You can find me probably tweeting about Chet maybe at some point. I might have to find this stat. At Leif Thulin, and yeah, just keep listening to our show. We really appreciate the support, and if you ever need some draft talk, I'm more than happy to on Twitter. So at Leif Thulin, and thanks again for the support of this show.
Yeah, and please like and subscribe us on YouTube. We just started up. The whole show is getting started up on Locked On NBA Draft on YouTube, and then with the NBA trade deadline coming this week, from 2 to 4 p.m. On February 10th. At 3 p.m. 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry, my time zones are all mixed up. We are doing a special Locked On NBA trade deadline show with John Corrales of Locked On Celtics. You got Kim Becker as well. Locked On fantasy basketball host Josh Lloyd. I watched it last year. It was really fun. Who knows what this deadline will be? We already saw. I was actually recording a podcast when this happened, and it was the Karis LeVert trade. It's going to be craziness. I live for it. Turn on Woj notifications. But that'll do it for this show. Next week, we'll be Locked On Chet Holmgren. Thank you for listening, and please go ahead and check us out on YouTube, and have a wonderful rest of your day.